Next, on Currents News, expressing heartache along with outrage.
Jill and I, our hearts ache, like I'm sure all of you do as well.
President Biden mourning those killed in the bombing at Kabul airport while vowing those responsible will pay. A New York welcome. Governor Kathy Hochul says the Empire State is stepping up to serve as a beacon of hope and refuge and accept with open arms the Afghans fleeing their country.
And his message was always unity, strength in numbers, how do we make things better working together.
Remembering a giant in the community, America's first Haitian-born bishop, Sansaricq, is mourned and honored throughout the diocese. And they're taking it to the streets. We'll bring you to a walking tour of Chinatown aimed at boosting business and raising understanding to tamp down hate crimes against the Asian community. The news starts right now. Hello, I'm Christine Persichetti. U.S. forces on edge and on guard in Kabul following the bombing that took the lives of close to 200 Afghans and more than a dozen Americans. The terror group ISIS-K claiming responsibility as we creep toward the August 31st deadline to clear out of Afghanistan.
Their legacy will be the thousands of Afghans, little girls and little boys, who are alive today.
Massachusetts Congressman Seth Moulton saw the evacuation efforts firsthand during his widely talked about trip to Kabul this week.
It was absolutely extraordinary.
And the evacuations continue, a desperate race against time. ISIS-K has claimed responsibility for the attack, and the Department of Defense says more attempted attacks are imminent. That could mean everything from rocket attacks to suicide bombings, either by car bomb or vest, like what happened Thursday. U.S. officials say they're hunting down the attackers at the same time they're trying to prevent more attacks, even turning to the Taliban for help and sharing intelligence.
We cut down the information we give the Taliban. They don't get the full range of information we have, but we give them enough to act in time and space to try to prevent these attacks. And we believe that some attacks have been thwarted by them.
Meanwhile, the Pentagon says the August 31st deadline for troops to leave remains. This attack happening as many Afghans here in the U.S. have been struggling to get in contact with their loved ones. Currents News' Emily Drewby spoke with one breakfast cart owner in Manhattan who fears for his family's safety.
On 32nd and 3rd in Manhattan, there's a breakfast cart.
Thank you very much.
It belongs to Mohammed Nasiri. He's desperate to get his wife out of Afghanistan.
I wish, she's coming here. I worry about her too much.
From Afghanistan himself, he came to the U.S. in 1987, operating this cart for 20 years. He met his wife while visiting home. Married in 2018, that's when he began the process of bringing her here, but the pandemic extending standard immigration delays even more. Now, with the Taliban taking over, his desire to bring her here has turned to desperation, fearing for her life if it's discovered she's married to someone living in America. That is why we aren't using her name or her photo. Mohammed says she's been to the airport several times. Despite having paperwork to prove her marriage and her impending visa, she's been unable to get out.
She called me, nobody let me to come in the airport, to go inside, so what can I do?
Mohammed took a call from her while we were interviewing him.
Assalamu alaikum.
She's okay for now. He's spent hours on the phone to push her paperwork through, but he knows she's running out of time.
Right now the situation is very bad. Please, people, help me.
Mohammed is hoping someone might see this story and be able to help.
I don't know what's going to happen next.
One thing he does know, if she doesn't get out now, she might never. In Manhattan, Emily Drewby, Currents News.
Meanwhile, Governor Kathy Hochul announcing a plan to welcome Afghan refugees here to New York. She says the Empire State is stepping up to serve as a beacon of hope and refuge, announcing that the state's refugee services and Office for New Americans are ready to help resettle thousands of incoming Afghan refugees here in New York. For more information on how to help Afghan refugees arriving in New York, you can contact the ONA hotline at 800-566-7635. The hotline is also available to immigrants in need of assistance. The service is strictly confidential. Meanwhile, Catholic Charities is also springing into action to welcome the Afghan refugees. Currents News' Emily Druby reports from Manhattan.
As the Taliban grows stronger each day in Afghanistan, Catholic Charities of the Archdiocese of New York is trying to help those fleeing for their life.
We've already begun that process, and we're prepared to do more.
Monsignor Kevin Sullivan has spearheaded that effort. Catholic Charities Archdiocese of New York has already assisted 13 refugees, just some of the many who've risked their lives to help the U.S. military.
This group of people really gave their lives for an effort that we led.
3 families ripped from their homes, explains Mario Russell of the nonprofit's Immigrant and Refugee Services.
They aren't looking to leave their neighborhoods, their homes, their work, their families, their friends. I mean, this is incredibly stressful, incredibly painful.
They're individuals who needed to be treated with dignity and respect, and holistically to whatever we can do to enable them to survive and to thrive.
The help they provide varies. It can be anything from employment to education, even paying for housing.
I think the circumstances under which people are leaving are so much more confusing, so much more frankly chaotic, who have been typically processing for, say, months, if not years. These families are moving much more quickly. So I think that the dislocation is profound.
In the past 5 years, Catholic Charities has helped 39 Afghan families and others move from more than 100 countries. In Manhattan, Emily Druby, Currents News.
There's a lot more news headed your way. The Diocese of Brooklyn is reeling from a great loss following the untimely passing of Auxiliary Bishop Guy Sansaricq, America's first Haitian bishop. We'll take a look back at his life and legacy when we return.
There are now some big changes to the tablet website. You can get personalized access to the Catholic news you value. Sign up for free at thetablet.org.
It's yet another blow to the Haitian community and a great loss to the entire diocese. Guy Sansaricq, the first bishop of Haitian descent both here in Brooklyn and in the U.S., passed away this past weekend.
Profess our faith.
One of the Brooklyn Diocese's most beloved leaders, retired Auxiliary Bishop Guy Sansaricq, died unexpectedly. The leader of the Haitian apostolate for over 3 decades inspired people with his quiet, soft-spoken leadership.
I'm going to ask you some questions.
Nicholas DiMarzio, who knew Bishop Sansaricq since the 1980s, spoke to us by phone about the sad news.
He was a leader. He wasn't boisterous. He was calm and directed in all that he did, and that also inspired people.
America's first Haitian bishop, Guy Sansaricq, was born in Haiti, the youngest of 9 children. He attended the seminary in Canada and was ordained in Haiti at the Cathedral of Port-au-Prince in 1960. Soon after, he was sent to minister to Haitian refugees in the Bahamas and then sent to Rome to study at the Gregorian University.
Do you believe that there is a God, Father Almighty?
He came to New York after his family fled to Queens in the late 60s because of Haiti's oppressive regime. But Bishop Sansaricq never forgot his people or his homeland. Bishop DiMarzio remembers his commitment in the Brooklyn Diocese, where he worked with the Haitian community in almost 20 different parishes.
He has, kept that National Haitian Apostolate going for many years. He had a blog, I think, and a newsletter that he shepherded. So we kept in contact with the Haitian people, not just in the diocese, but nationwide, exactly, really beyond.
He was ordained an auxiliary bishop in 2006 and officially retired in 2010. Bishop Octavio Cisneros also knew and worked with Bishop Sansaricq for decades.
He was a leader for his people, for the Haitian community. Above all, he was a pastor.
Bishop Sansaricq was born in the small town of Jérémie, Haiti in 1934, the youngest of 9 siblings. In 1948, he began his seminary education in Haiti and then Canada and was ordained in 1960 at the Cathedral of Port-au-Prince. In 1971, he arrived at the Sacred Heart Church here in Cambria Heights in the Brooklyn Diocese. 16 years later, the U.S. bishops assigned him to head the National Haitian Apostolate. In 1999, Pope John Paul II promoted him to Monsignor, and 17 years after that, he was consecrated Auxiliary Bishop of Brooklyn. Bishop Sansaricq passed away on the eve of the 15th anniversary of his episcopal ordination. He was 86 years old. Here to look back at the life and legacy of Bishop Sansaricq is the Bishop of Brooklyn, Nicholas DiMarzio. He joins former Tablet editor Ed Wilkinson for this week's Into the Deep. Ed.
Thank you, Christine. And we're with Bishop DiMarzio today on something of a sad occasion. Bishop, the diocese is mourning the death of Bishop Guy Sansaricq. He seemed like a very gentle man, a very kind man, but he was a guy who took some very strong positions early on in this priesthood, wasn't he?
He certainly did. You know, when he left Haiti, it was opposition to the Duvalier regime. He went and became a missionary in the Bahamas and the islands there, because many Haitians had migrated there, some legally, some illegally. They were working there, and he became their chaplain.
Mm-hmm. It was rather significant that he was the first Haitian-born bishop to be ordained a bishop here in the United States. What did that mean to the Diocese of Brooklyn?
Well, I think it was a real honor for the not only the Haitians, but also all Black Catholics. I mean, that was the first Black bishop in the diocese. So everyone saw him as a symbol of having arrived, in a sense, of being recognized. Again, our bishops in our diocese basically cover different groups. We have a variety of ethnicities and backgrounds, and everybody likes to see someone that they're familiar with to be a bishop or auxiliary bishop.
Yeah. What was he like to deal with, say, at the meetings, at diocesan meetings? I know you met often with your auxiliary bishops. What did he bring to the table?
Well, he wasn't loquacious, but when he had a point, he made a point. It was clear. He was a man of few words, but it was very direct.
I understand that even just days before his death, he was working on relief efforts for the recent earthquake in Haiti.
Right. Just 2 days before he died, I received an email from him, which he sent out to several people, explaining how he wanted to gather efforts of bringing people together to assist with the relief effort in Haiti, long term more than the short term needs. The emergency needs, the international organizations are there. The relief services has been always there. So that isn't the major issue. The major issue is the long term reconstruction, which is really a problem. There's almost 200 structures in the 3 dioceses that are affected that have either been completely destroyed or damaged. So it's a big long-term project.
Yeah, there was a very devastating earthquake there years ago, and Bishop Sansaricq actually went back to the island and did a fact-finding mission for the U.S. bishops, didn't he?
Yes, he was there with Catholic Relief Services. I had gone just, I think, a few weeks before that with Archbishop Wensky on our own mission, looking at right after the earthquake. So he was, respected as someone who could make analysis and give good suggestions.
Yeah. And what can you say about his evangelization work here in the diocese? Because he was big on having an educated laity, wasn't he?
Definitely. He had started his own Creole speaking and French speaking classes for the Haitian people, so that they were equal to what we did with the program for the laity. So it was always advertised that we had that available. And he had a blog which he used to communicate to Haitians around the world. He was big on education. He wanted lay people to be involved in the life of the church.
Yeah, he's a great man. Thank you, Bishop, for sharing your remembrances of Bishop Sansaricq today. And now we're going back to our newsroom.
Thank you, Ed and Bishop DiMarzio. The faithful feeling a great sense of loss across the Diocese of Brooklyn, especially within the Haitian community. We spoke with those who knew Bishop Sansaricq well. Father Hilaire Belizaire, who worked closely with Bishop Sansaricq for years.
I'm thankful to God for the kind of person he was, also for the legacy that he has left us, a legacy of love and service. As I said, he's really an icon for us, for the Haitian clergy.
Elsie San Louis, who runs that Haitian organization he co-founded and was also married by him.
And his message was always unity, strength in numbers, how do we make things better working together. So this is somebody who's touched lives and whose impact has gone beyond the borders of the diocese.
And Marie Fouché, who knew him well from being deeply involved with the Haitian and Catholic communities in the Diocese of Brooklyn.
Regardless of your class status, your educational background, you were a human being, a child of God for him.
There will be 2 wakes celebrating the life of Bishop Sansaricq. The first will be held on August 31st at St. Jerome, and the second will be at St. Gregory the Great on September 1st, followed by a Mass in his honor. His Mass of Christian burial will be held at the Co-Cathedral of St. Joseph on September 2nd at 11 a.m. And you can read lots more on the extraordinary life of Bishop Sansaricq and his service to the Church in this week's edition of The Tablet. Still to come on this special edition of Currents News, Pounding the Pavement, how 2 young women are looking to revive Manhattan's Chinatown. Plus, we'll talk to a scholar about all the ways that understanding the origins of the Bible can help us better understand our Catholic faith. Do you have a story idea or want to share a tip? Email us at newstips@desalesmedia.org or call our 24-hour number, 718-517-3122. We'll be right back. A troubling rise in Asian hate crimes has emerged during the pandemic. It's a 1-2 punch from Manhattan's Chinatown, which is also stinging from business losses due to lockdowns. Now, 2 young women are looking to alleviate both by pounding the pavement. Our Emily Druby takes us on their tour.
Walking, walking, and more walking. It's how Anna Huang and Chloe Chan spend their free time, teaching others about Manhattan's Chinatown. Together, they're the Mott Street Girls, named for a popular downtown road, and chically for MSG, a flavor enhancer often associated with Chinese food. Starting this tour business after the pandemic shut down the local museum they volunteered with, doing it to help drive traffic back to Chinatown.
This was our niche, this is what we could bring to our table with our pre-existing skill sets.
Historical walking tours done by the 2 second-generation Chinese Americans with close ties to this community, creating understanding during a pivotal time. In New York City, attacks against Asian Americans happening over and over and over and over again. In 2021, 102 hate crimes were reported against Asian Americans. During the same time frame last year, there were only 21. It's a fear Anna and Chloe are forced to live with, but they're fighting back. Their weapon, this tour, and the understanding it promotes.
Drawing parallels of history, it's like seeing eye to eye on a lot of things. And I think that helps with stopping the Asian hate crimes because you're being empathetic with each other. You're trying to understand each other better.
Also bringing much needed business back to the area.
Our role as second-generation Chinese Americans is to combat that misinformation and all of that stereotype against Chinese Americans.
MSG, it's a business, but also it's a calling, one Anna and Chloe have happily answered. In Manhattan's Chinatown, Emily Druby, Currents News.
For the past decade, a successful study program called A Biblical Walk Through the Mass has guided people through the biblical roots of the liturgy. Now, to celebrate a decade of success, a 10th anniversary edition has been released with all new content and videos. I spoke with author and theologian Dr. Edward Sri about how understanding our biblical roots can enrich our faith.
Yeah, so many Catholics, they just go through the motions, right? I mean, I've done that before. I show up, I make the sign of the cross, I stand, I kneel, I say thanks be to God and with your spirit. So I know when to stand and say the right words, but I feel, I don't know what it's all about. I think if we can understand the beauty of what we're saying and doing in the liturgy, we can get more out of Mass. You probably hear that a lot. People say, I wish I could just get more out of Mass. And I think that's true, but I'll get more the more I can give to Mass. And all the prayers, all the rituals, all the symbols from the liturgy come from the scriptures. And if we knew the biblical background, then we'll really appreciate all that's happening in the liturgy.
Absolutely. And so what can we do to help Catholics understand really the healing gift of the Eucharist?
Oh, the Eucharist isn't just a symbol. It's not just a reminder of Jesus. It is Jesus's very body, blood, soul, and divinity. He's the God of love. That's what the scriptures tell us. God is love. And the God who loves us, the God who is love, loves us so much that, love wants to be near the one it loves. And so he came down, became one of us in Jesus Christ 2,000 years ago, but he wants to remain with us. Emmanuel, God is with us. And so he's so desiring to be close to us. He remains present with us in the gift of himself in the Eucharist. So the bread and wine at the consecration, every Mass is changed into Jesus's very body and blood. It's no longer bread. It looks like bread, tastes like bread, but underneath those outward appearances, it's Jesus, love himself. And he is there at all of your churches right now. And he's there every time we go to Mass. He's there when we receive him in Holy Communion. That's how much he wants to be at one with us. And so I think about how, that same Jesus that walked around Galilee 2,000 years ago and was going around healing people, comforting them in their afflictions, giving them guidance and encouragement when they needed consolation in life. Like that same Jesus is wanting to work miracles in our lives today. And he's right there in our own towns, our own little cities, and in all the churches and all the tabernacles. And I think if Jesus was coming to your town to work a miracle, you would drop everything. You'd leave work and go see him. And yet we take for granted the gift of the Eucharist. Let's stop by and visit him, be close to him, because he wants to work a change in our hearts. He wants to help us grow in love and trust and holiness. And he wants to heal us of our hurts and our wounds and comfort us in our afflictions today. And that's the great gift of that same Jesus from 2,000 years ago is present to us so closely in the Eucharist.
So we have a little bit more time left. Tell us what's new about the 10th anniversary edition. What can we expect and why did you release it now?
Well, 10 years since we had the new Mass translation, if you remember, and we're used to that now. And it was just a great time to kind of put out a new edition of the book. So I went through really in chapter by chapter, paragraph by paragraph, and kind of wrote it in the way I write today. So people used to my books can kind of connect with it. But we also added new sections, to it. We added a new introduction to explain more of the beauty of the Mass itself. We got into different parts of the Mass that weren't in the original one. So I think it's a great time. I think especially in light of the kind of crisis that we're facing, not just in the culture in the world, but even a crisis of faith that many Catholics, is like over 67% of Catholics don't believe in the real presence of the Eucharist. This is a timely moment where we need to pray for an outpouring of Eucharistic faith, Eucharistic love. And I hope that this can be a resource to help ordinary Catholics understand that which is, most important to us as Catholics, the Mass that we encounter every Sunday and all throughout our lives.
Right. I think that's great. Wonderful. And, I think it is a perfect time for this because so many people stopped going to Mass, during the pandemic because we were allowed to. Right. And then, I think a lot of them are like, well, I was allowed to then. Why do I have to come back now? So I think this is, your message is a good one for people today. A big thank you to author and theologian Dr. Edward Sri. If you'd like to check out the 10th anniversary edition of A Biblical Walk Through the Mass, just go to ascensionpress.com. And that is Currents News. I'm Christine Persichetti. Thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time.